Hello, welcome to more Raising Questions, where we are raising questions. We have a lot to talk about. This is sort of a year-end review, and we're going to start out with the Russia hacking issue and media attacks on the president-elect, and get to the real issue later on. And so therefore, we'll start out with the Russian hacking issue. We've noticed recently that the press and a lot of other people are very much up in arms about the former Soviet Union, Russia, attacking the United States and trying to destabilize the electoral process. Well, they are indeed, apparently, the Russians, are trying to interfere with or at least influence the American electoral process, and some people give them credit for electing Donald Trump president, and that has caused an awful lot of anti-Russian fervor and also a lot of, I think, hyper-patriotic reaction. One thing that you don't hear that I would like to mention is the United States undoubtedly does quite a few things like the Russians are accused of doing. We undoubtedly do ourselves. And if you look at the broader issue and not just cyber attacks, you could ask a question, raise the question, has the United States got any history in influencing foreign policy or make that foreign elections and foreign governments and even changes of governments? Well, you don't have to look too far. Look at Iraq, for instance, far away, but not far away in time. Even in other countries, there's a list that I have: Guatemala, Iran, Haiti, the Congo, or just Congo, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. Look at all that. It's a large, long, very wide trail of places where the United States has unfortunately interfered also in the electoral process, to put it mildly. I don't think we have any right to climb up on a very high moral horse on this issue. Let's go on to more media attacks on the president-elect, which we've touched on before. A lot of attacks on the new president, the president-to-be, have taken place in the media, and it forces the question, why? Where were the media, that's the question I'm raising, about 20 years ago or less, when the United States embarked on adventures abroad because of what is now regarded by at least many, many observers as lies perpetrated by the Bush regime, by the George W. Bush regime. Where was the press? Where were the media at that time? A lot of people in the media realize they blew it. They did not expose the lies behind Condoleezza Rice's statements and the vice president's statements and Bush's statements at that time. And it seems to me they're trying to make up for lost time. A lot of the attacks on the new president-elect are rather spurious, let's put it that way. For one thing, they're attacking his choice of cabinet people, and they're saying there are too many generals. Well, there may be, who knows? Maybe not every cabinet member should be a general. Maybe there ought to be some sort of a rule where you only have one or nothing, 0 generals, who knows? But the idea of generals at the top ranks of the government is an old one. No fewer than 12 American presidents have been generals, and a lot of other presidents have been veterans. 12 of them, almost 1/4. Actually, that's more than 1/4 of our presidents have been generals. One of them, for instance, General Eisenhower. And if you look at their record, Eisenhower's record at least, for instance, how warlike were they? Not very. So I think we have less to worry about with Donald Trump's appointments to the cabinet and to other positions than might at first appear. You can't just say, look, this guy's a general, he's warlike. You have to ask also, what about past people in the government, the ones who were warlike? Robert McNamara, for instance, pushed the Vietnam War with great enthusiasm. And then he came out later in life and said he'd made horrible, tragic mistakes. God bless him for doing that. He was a civilian. The Secretary of Defense was Robert McNamara, under Kennedy, pushing the Vietnam War very, very hard. It doesn't take a general to do that. And in fact, a lot of generals come out of war with one idea: never again. Well, let's look at another charge that a lot of people are tossing around, that Mr. Trump has already interfered in the free market by calling the Carrier air conditioning people in Indiana and saying, don't take those jobs abroad. And Carrier said, well, all right, fine, we won't. Or at least some of them will be left here in Indiana. Some of the new president's critics are saying he has interfered in the free market. Again, almost entirely a spurious argument against the incoming president. If you want to see government interference in the free market, just look at the Pentagon budget. Look at the defense budget. 1/4 or so of federal income taxes that you pay goes to the Pentagon. The average household pays, I understand it, pays about $13,000 in federal income tax. $3,300 or so of that amount goes right to the Pentagon. The Pentagon then purchases things left and right. Obviously, they purchase a lot of things. They have an $800 billion budget, and they interfere constantly in economic decisions that would be made without that incredibly large Pentagon budget. In other words, we buy a lot of missiles instead of building a lot of schools. Talk about interference with the so-called free market. That's been going on now for at least 75, maybe even longer, years. Ever since World War II especially, the Pentagon has been, quote, end quote, interfering in the free market. So when you hear something like that, criticism about the incoming president for interfering in the free market, take that with a grain of salt. Let's look at the real issue. What's really happening in every aspect of, at least in my opinion, in every aspect of the situation with regard to the incoming president. The real issue might be the fragmentation of the United States. A lot of people are saying Congress is fragmented, and there's a huge problem there with part of the Congress supporting the incoming president and a huge part of Congress not supporting the president, the incoming president. And even among his supporters now we're reading that there are a lot of people who are having second thoughts. Well, it's not a fragmented Congress, in my opinion, that is the problem. It's a fragmented country. And that raises perhaps the biggest issue of them all. What are the Democrats going to be doing in the next 2 years before the next congressional elections and in the next 4 years to elect a different president after Donald Trump's first term? We Democrats, I count myself among them, have to try to overcome one central issue. How are we going to become Democrats again? Instead of appealing just to rich people, or let's just say well-off people, who have all the right ideas about the environment and medical care and so forth, how can we also appeal to the people who need that medical care and who need more attention and who think they will have gotten it from Donald Trump? How can we appeal to the people who are well off and have the right social attitudes, in other words? And how can we appeal at the same time to the people who voted for Donald Trump, many of whom don't have, quote unquote, good values that fit into the Democrats and the Democratic Party's scheme of things? How are we going to do that? As I've already hinted at, I think the best thing we could possibly do is to start becoming the Democratic Party again and appeal to the people who really need us or need the Democratic Party for economic well-being and for mental well-being and for well-being also medically. The Economist magazine, published in Britain and read widely in America, did a fabulous study about why people voted for Donald Trump. And according to their study, which was a limited study, but it looked really impressive, the people who could be counted on to vote for Donald Trump, the one criterion that really labeled that group of voters was, how good is your health? People with less than fabulous health, people with bad health issues especially, tended to vote for Donald Trump. So my question is, how can we, or how can the Democratic Party, how can the liberal wing of the Republican Party appeal to people who actually need us? And how can we get a president who appeals on that level into the White House? Of course, we've got to give Donald Trump every possibility. We've got to give him a break. Maybe he means it when he said, drain the swamp and start appealing to the people who are really angry at the system. That's what the Democratic Party has to do. The big question is, are they really going to take that seriously and start doing it?